Hi, it's Jack Hedges from the Humans Connecting team. Our podcast is all about serving, supporting, challenging, and inspiring you to become a connected human. The content of our podcast is of a general nature, and consuming this content is not the same as seeking individual advice from a connection mentor, a registered mental health professional, or a coach. Conversations about human connection address loneliness. We destigmatize loneliness here at Humans Connecting. We do that by talking about loneliness openly. Loneliness conversations necessarily include a range of topics which at times may be difficult for us to talk about, to hear, and to sit with. If, throughout our conversation, this is true for you, we encourage you to please contact a mental health hotline. The link in the episode description can help you find some immediate support for many places you may be in the world. Our advice to you is this: meet yourself where you are and how you are right now. If you don't feel up to it, we'll be right here ready to be by your side when you are ready. We're glad you're here. Let's jump in.
Hello, it's Phil. Welcome to the Humans Connecting podcast. I know this might be a bit odd to do, but I want to pause for just a moment, like seconds into this episode, and say, out of all of the podcasts in the universe and all of the videos on YouTube, you've chosen to press play on our podcast, on our little podcast, which is all about wanting you to be a connected human. And however you found your way here, whether you were kind of curious or you've actively searched out our content, or an algorithm through the service that you're watching or listening to this has suggested it to you, and you've like, oh, what's this about? Or perhaps even the best algorithm of them all, a friend, someone you know, sent this to you saying you've got to listen to this. However you found your way to this little podcast, we're really glad that you're here, because this podcast and all our work at Humans Connecting is all about two things. First of all, we destigmatize loneliness. And then second of all, we are all about helping you get the connection that you need and deserve as the wonderfully awesome, amazing human that you are. So we do that here at Humans Connecting by focusing on serving you, supporting you, challenging you, and inspiring you to take steps towards becoming an ever more connected human. And here at the Humans Connecting podcast, we do that by talking openly about loneliness. We talk about and we share stories from people with lived experience of loneliness and who have used it to get the connection that they need. And we also talk to experts across a variety of fields who are working hard to understand and tell us that it's like what it means to be a connected human. That's what we're all about here at Humans Connecting. And in that serving, supporting, challenging, and inspiring you, it's all about destigmatizing loneliness and helping you become a connected human. And if you're asking, well, who the hell are you to be doing this? Well, let me introduce myself. I'm Phil McAuliffe. I am a global loneliness thought leader, and I'm the founder of Humans Connecting. I'm a speaker, I'm an author, I'm a connection mentor, and I commentate on loneliness and human connection in the media. And at Humans Connecting and through our website, you'll find all our products and services that are designed to help you take steps that you need in your life to empower you, encourage you to become an ever more connected human. Again, that's all through humansconnecting.org. And really, I started this kind of conversation, this like our services, and started Humans Connecting and working on loneliness because, well, as I entered middle age, realized that I was experiencing loneliness, and it wasn't a fun realization, let me tell you. And well, you probably have a good understanding of how unfun it is within yourself. But for me, I looked around for some support, some help, some advice, and what was available, it didn't speak to me. So I created it. And here you are, listening to it, watching it, however brought you here, you're here, getting the advice and support and talking openly in a way that I really needed when I was perhaps where you are right now. As part of that, like I'm really keen to introduce Jacob Darkin, our guest here for this episode of the podcast. Jacob is an inclusion advocate and based in Sydney, Australia. And Jacob uh, came to us. He and the company that he works for was reached out to us about our services, and Jacob and I got to talk. And in those conversations, Jacob shared some of his story with me, where he spent 9 months in a spinal unit after having a spinal injury in Sydney a few years ago. And there was parts of his story that I thought I just have to get him on the podcast, and I'm really grateful that he accepted readily. And you're about to listen to the conversation we recorded. Part of the conversation talks about the rehab that Jacob went through. And as you can understand, um, part of that rehab when you're in hospital in the spinal unit, there's physical rehab and there's mental health support as well as people who have go through like a sudden life-changing event and find themselves with mobility issues and mobility impairment, needing to really relook and refocus on life and how they're living it. Part of the conversation, and I really wanted to underline this before we get into it, um, is Jacob did something. He ran some experiments. He tested some hypotheses, which you'll find out in just a moment. And one of those, he realized that he needed to learn how to do connection with other humans. And so he did something wonderful that you'll hear about, and pay attention to when he talks about his time spent in lifts, or you might know them as elevators, because he didn't know this, and I shared this with him in the episode, and I really wanted to identify this and share this concept with you, because it's in the title of this podcast episode. But basically, he realized that he needed to work on his social health and well-being. Now, if you're not familiar with that, Jacob wasn't familiar with it, and it's entirely understandable that you might not be familiar with it. Social health is the concept that you will begin to hear more and more of over the coming weeks, months, years, because social health relates to the quality, your perceived quality of your social connections, of your relationships with yourself, with those most important to you, and to your communities. So if you think about it, you're going to be more familiar with the concept of physical health and physical well-being, and mental health and mental well-being, and emotional health and emotional well-being, and know what each of those relates to in terms of health and well-being. So if you're unfamiliar with the concept of social health, you're familiar with it now. It relates to the quality of your relationships within yourself and with other people and humans around you. There's an excellent book that I'm going to link in the episode description from our friend Cassie Killam, who has recently released a book over the past few months. It's August in 2024. She released it in June 2024. It's a fantastic book. I am just wanting to have Cassie on the podcast in a little while in a future episode. Cassie, please, that would be great. But viewer, listener, I'll link it in the episode description so you can get more of an understanding if you're interested about social health and well-being. Okay, with all of that said, I hope you're comfortable. We're really glad that you're here. You're going to absolutely love Jacob and the conversation, which starts right now. Jacob Darkin, welcome to the Humans Connecting podcast.
Thank you, Phil. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me on.
I'm really just excited to have this conversation with you because you and I, we've been having a few chats over the last few weeks. And one of the things that has been really awesome about our conversations, I'm trying to come up with some different word, some other kind of superlative, but truly they have been awesome. Some of the insights that you have really kind of floored me. And I've just been like, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you because I'm really keen to share your wisdom, if you're open to it, with the audience here at the Humans Connecting podcast. So happy that you're here.
Oh, thank you, Phil. And I was just wondering, does it take much to floor you? Does it take much? What's your level?
I really want to be cool and say, so sorry, viewer, listener, the audio just dropped out there a moment. Jacob asked, does it take much to floor me? And I want to say something really cool, Jacob. I really do. Saying no, like, oh, well, yes, like I'm, some kind of, fortress that's, it's impossible to topple. It's like, I actually feel that if we are truly present in the moment with, whether we're by ourselves or with someone on a Zoom call, or someone in real life, then we are open to the most surprising things flooring us, and really kind of just having us reel back a moment and just go, whoa, that was amazing. So it doesn't take much. Proudly, I'll say, it doesn't take much now to floor me. But on some days, like that, particularly when I'm busy, I'm like, nah, got no time. I'm not open. I'm not open to the wonders of what's around. So that's a great question.
I think that your response is wonderful. I think that a lot of people can learn from that too, because we are living in quite a busy time where we are constantly doing one thing after the other and just actually practicing perhaps even some gratitude, and being in the moment. If we look around, there's some pretty remarkable things, and I'm so wonderfully happy to be here right now and present.
Thank you. And it's a gift. And before I ask you a question in terms of like basically, can you introduce yourself? But listeners of the podcast, go back to 3 episodes to the number 1 connection killer. It's all about busyness and how busyness takes us out of the present and how connection only ever lives in the present. So that wasn't even scripted, Jacob. That was like this little detour wasn't even scripted. So with that happy flooring that just happened in your response, could you please introduce yourself, and yeah, like what brings you here to the Humans Connecting podcast?
Absolutely. So my name's Jacob Darkin, and if I were to introduce myself 5 years ago, it would be different to introducing myself 10 years ago to now. But I think it's becoming clearer and clearer, like who I am and why that I do the things that I do. So I've had a background in construction, and I realize how accessibility, when built for people, this in an aging community would benefit from accessibility. I've always had a passion about connection, and maybe that's come from living in a broken family. And so I was living with my mum, single parent, had mental health conditions, bipolar and schizophrenia. This was all normal for me, and I think that just over the times being living with a single mum, and not much information around bipolar and schizophrenia, it led me to being under the care of the minister until I was 18, living with my grandma. I realized there's a gap in information, and who am I? I'm thinking that I'm just trying to make things a little bit easier for people to understand in a safe way, and I'm doing that through education. I'm doing that through accessibility, awareness. I have a spinal cord injury myself, and that happened about 5 years ago. It led me to being in hospital for over 9 months, and that was when I was a young, fit male, never needing to go into the hospital. Only when I was at the work site, stepping on a rusty nail and needing to cover up like blood pouring out my foot. But besides that, I'd never seen what healthcare in Australia was like firsthand, and needing to ask for help was very difficult. And I came out of hospital. I started to actually 9 months in hospital. I learned a lot about why I'm here. I spent a lot of time trying to understand why do I even exist when I was just spending hours on bed, laying down. I ended up doing my own type of university, and it was just around public health and things like that. Funnily enough, I got into public health at university, and the things that we're covering was what I was learning. And what I learned from the time spent in hospital was, I feel like in society we like to have sport, we like to do food and cooking, we like to teach someone what we have learnt, whether it's an apprentice or children. Of course, we have spirituality and religion too. And I think like coming down to sport, it's like one community versus another community. What is it serving? It's just interesting. And then food. It brings out like flavors and experiences and communities. And with education, it's just like this thing that we've spent our whole life learning or mastering, hopefully. And we want to share that to someone. So it's leaving somewhat of a legacy. And maybe just putting a little bit more of education of what we didn't learn into that as we share. And then the act of like gifting. And I think that I wanted to make a hypothesis once I came out of hospital. If I did all of those things and having a spinal cord injury, being quadriplegic, would I actually serve in my community well? So I challenged my hypothesis, and I started to do all of those things. I got into wheelchair rugby and sport. I got into teaching, and I was in a mentoring role, other people with disabilities that are just on the start of their journey. I got into learning about education, and so got into university and started studying public health. And just those things alone, it got me out of the cycle of considering myself as just a person with a disability and not going to serve. And the moment I got into all those things, like opportunities came, and it was really difficult at the time to see further than the next day, being highly medicated with a lot of pain medications, and like my whole life flipped like a 180 because of the physical capacity that I could do. So I regained function, and I started to see myself in different places, and a lot of it was to do with just challenging myself and then sharing what I've learned to others. It's really interesting that what I learned about being in a hospital and why we serve and why we are here, like actually worked out as true, my hypothesis. And who am I? I'm just curious, and I'm trying to learn as much as possible and share to other communities, making it fun, making it accessible.
That's just simply wonderful. That's simply wonderful. We can change the world when we allow ourselves to be curious. And one of the things that I think I may have said this to you before, Jacob, in one of our conversations. But if not, I'll say this. I'll say this again. And listener and viewer, you may have heard this a couple of times on previous episodes. But generally, we can't ever choose choose what happens. Try as we may, we feel that we can go through life controlling life. And, a couple of times through life, we're given sort of pretty tough reminders, uncomfortable reminders. And uncomfortable reminders are a dramatic understatement sometimes. Like really horrible reminders that we do not control life, no matter how great we think we are. And we're generally pretty great, but we can't control things, right? However, the only thing that is in our control, and I love this, the only thing that are in our control are our words, our thoughts, and our actions. We get to choose what we say. We get to choose, when we notice what we're thinking, we get to choose different thoughts. And we get to choose our actions, where our body is. We get to choose that, generally speaking. And that's where the power is. The power is in the response. So that's at once, like I'm saying this to you, Jacob. I'm saying this to me. I'm saying this to the viewer and the listener. Like, it's at once like inspiring and like, yep, okay, good. And then you go to like respond. And he's like, like, this is pretty hard. This is pretty tough to do. What you said there, that concept of curiosity, is an absolute superpower for taking the next logical step. And because, to control days, and hi, I'm Phil, I'm a reforming control seeking enthusiast. We can want to know the outcome before we like try something. We go to do something. We want to know how it ends up before we do it. But curiosity just kind of gives us that real grace to give it a go and go, you know what? Like I'm in control of my words and my thoughts and my actions. I'm going to respond with curiosity to this. Let's see how this goes. Ask a question, challenge something, challenge yourself, challenge, the system. But respond with curiosity, because the last thing that we need is more judgment. And curiosity kills judgment. So thank you.
Oh no, thank you. That reminds me of the times that I was in hospital for so long. I had all this time, and I found myself going into the elevators, and it's 20 seconds or something like that, and it would give me an opportunity to talk or be there with people that I'll never ever meet again. It's at least 9 floors or something like that in Royal North Shore Hospital. I was on level 7, the spinal ward. Like I remember I changed my address to that on my driver's license. And the conversations that the power wheelchair that I was sitting on, and the catheter bag that was on my shin, showing all my bladder. But like, I think that the conversations that I had in the elevator were just so present and raw, and people were okay to not be okay. They might have seen me and be like, well, I'm going to the cancer level, and to see my son. Yeah, and it's terminal. And I think that the elevator was just the way for them to grieve and to also be okay, with their emotion as they left. It was really interesting. It was like the ultimate elevator pitches, and I'm not selling anything, and they're not selling anything. It was just we were just pitching connection, I think, and it was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Gift. What a gift you gave people.
I think they gave it to me as well.
Yeah.
I got to learn so much about others, and just about what people were going through, and that comes through culture and ability, and yeah, just so much, so many different things. And I met quite a vast variety of people in those, talking to doctors, surgeons, pharmacists, the people that are on the ward, the wards people, pushing all the beds. I met so many people in over
Yeah.
months, and everyone loves to connect, and everyone
Yes.
has a different way of connecting.
I have this image in my head, Jacob, of you, of you like, sitting in the corner of the elevator and or the lift, depending on where you're listening from, but and kind of holding court, and like, welcome to my office. We're going to be spending the next 20 seconds. We could choose to look at the door and ignore each other. We could choose to like look at our phones and and pretend to be busy, or we could lean into the awkwardness. And it just feels like to me you made like the best choice out of all of that. Like there's no fun in looking at your phone. There's no fun at like awkwardly staring at the door and like, how come this lift is so slow? There's like all the fun is in the awkwardness. But one of the things here that speaks to the gift that was present in that lift that you were giving and that you were receiving from people. Those lifts, hospital lifts, people don't go to hospital because things are fine. And your ability to be there as you're navigating your own circumstances, to be there for others when they were navigating circumstances that they didn't choose. And sure, there might not have been, you might not be on each other's Christmas cards list, and, you're not going around to dinner every other night with them or whatever now. Like you've not kept in contact. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of the people that were in the lift, just like you, all those present in the lift, remember that.
Yeah, wow. That's interesting. I never really thought about it, just until you mentioned that. I didn't even think about it. It was just me being present and being there. Like, I wasn't taking away. I wasn't writing down notes or anything like that. I think it was just allowing myself to connect, because I didn't have
Yeah.
any family visit me, and I guess I was seeking like an outlet of connection, and but I also think that other people are. And what is in between the connection? I think it's empathy.
It's go on.
I think that I learned a little bit about empathy through those lifts, um, and like the way that I could sort of help others, the viewers and or listeners, to understand it in the way that I've seen it was: imagine that you're at a Kmart and you're at lay-by, and it's a big long line, or just imagine you're at a ticket tech and you're waiting to get like Taylor Swift's tickets. But one thing that, even if you don't know the people on front or behind you on either of those situations, one thing that's true is that that is a damn long line. And
Hmm.
you could say to the person in front in a nice tone, damn, this is a long line, right? Like, this line is the longest line that I've seen today. And like, who even says that? That's okay. But the thing is, someone is going to be able to relate.
Yeah.
And once you have that first connection in a positive way, that's rapport, like that's empathy. And what I would maybe put that story towards in the elevator situation, I could just say, damn, this is an elevator. Like, like, that is so factual that you can't not say that's true. And but even that,
It
it's
is
like,
not.
okay, we are yeah, it's not an elevator. No one's gonna say that. But like, that is such a simple thing to say. And it catches everyone off guard. And it's just like my inner like ADHD, just like saying like intrusive thoughts. I'm gonna say it out loud. And it's just fun. And it doesn't have to, like, honestly, I don't even think it should be, but it doesn't have to be negative to build empathy and things like that. In Australian culture, we have a fair go attitude, and we're just easygoing people. And I think that's just like the culture in Australia, as multicultural as it is, which is brilliant. And I think we can really like lean onto those things. Like, damn, this is an elevator. Oh, you're going to level 3. Tell me about that. I'm going to level 7. Like, and it just opens up the conversation. And it might not go anywhere, and that's cool.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
I love it. There's so many parts of this that I love. That it is, yeah. One of the hardest things about doing what you did was opening your mouth. And like courage and bravery always needs to be called out and celebrated. And when we're in the midst of a loneliness experience, and viewer, listener, you might be there now, you may have recently been there. And you're going to be there again because like loneliness keeps on like happening in life. But one of the hardest things to do is to open your mouth. And if what comes out is such a statement of the exceedingly obvious, like this is why the weather is such a good opener. It's like sunny today. Yes, it is. Yes, you're right. And you can choose to do with that what you want, but it's a harmless opener. Sometimes it's a bit frustrating in terms of an opener, but it starts a conversation, and kind of like a real life improv class. Like you don't know the response that you're going to get, and you have to respond based on the response that you get, according to like what's going on for the other person, if they're open to it, all that kind of stuff. It feels to me that was kind of like connection gym for you,
Oh yeah.
like social gym. And you're probably, I'm just going to say, in hospital, you said you were in hospital for 9 months. Like there would have been rehab, you would have been working on your body, you would have been like, and I'm going to say, at least I hope that there was mental health support, support there for your mental well-being as you were learning to, you know, navigate your new unwanted reality after a spinal cord issue. Sorry, injury, not an issue. Um, and a key part, and when finding more and more out about this as well, like the importance of social health and well-being. And social health and well-being, it goes specifically to the quality of our connections. And it feels like if you're in rehab, like you were doing um, social rehab in that lift, and you probably haven't thought about it until now.
Yeah, I think that you're right about thinking about it until now. It was just one thing that I prescribed to myself, thinking that the physiotherapists and occupational therapists, they sort of finish at a particular time, and you might only get one session a week or two sessions a week. Um, so I sort of prescribe things to myself, and I did find that as like quite therapeutic. Um, and why is it that I chose that? And it might be what you're saying. It's like going into the uncomfort zone, just to open up your mouth, right? But like I'll address it to what I think it is. It's the anxiety of going and being like out of your uncomfort zone. So I think if I know what the barriers are, then I can address it. So if it's comfortable to be quiet, what's the opposite? And why is it the opposite? Why is it uncomfortable to be loud or to talk in an elevator? Why does that control who I am? Why should it control me? Is it serving me well? And I sort of that's my hypothesis. If I go into my uncomfort zone and speak to a person and be present, because that's what that's what the comfort's saying that I shouldn't do, then will it serve me well? And it does serve me well, and it serves others well too. But what's really core is that you got to be present, you got to mean it, be authentic, and sometimes silence is the best option if we can't be genuine in those times, because people, I think, have a really good bullshit radar in general, and it's just like if you aren't present, and if you didn't mean that, and if it's just like that is like a thing to say, like, oh, how's the weather today, but you didn't actually look up and you didn't actually see the way that the clouds have been formed, then they're like, why are you saying that? Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
So I did that to myself, and I find that having a bunch of hypotheses in my life and then trying to challenge them is a really good way for me to gain more capacity and be as untraumatized as possible, whatever that might look like.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, is it untraumatized as possible, or like traumatized with purpose?
Yeah, I
Trauma
don't
with
know, and I
meaning.
don't think I'll ever know.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask my therapist.
Yeah. 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 Well, let me know what the answer is. But the you said something there, Jacob, that I think is really well, I really want to come back to. When we know the barriers, when you know the barriers, you can address them. And I think that sounds wonderful. That sounds like, yeah, let's do it. And particularly, mobility wise, when you know the barriers, you can address it. Like, if there needs to be like a ramp as opposed to a set of stairs, or if there needs to be like an elevator as opposed to only having escalators, or whatever it is. Like, there's an access mobility kind of, response to it, in terms of like changing the built environment so it's more inclusive. But when it's within us, the principles still apply of knowing our barriers. And when it comes to something like loneliness, when it comes to our need for connection, loneliness aside, loneliness being what happens when we don't have the connection that we need, but knowing that we require socialization, like we are social beings and we need to socialize within ourselves, with those most important to us in our communities. We can know then that that's where the barriers are, and then we can start to address it. And we can choose to do that. Here's a full circle moment. We can choose to do that at any time, whether we're experiencing loneliness or not. And I just really wanted to underline that, because there was so much. You said that in not necessarily a throwaway way, but you said that that really landed with me in such an awesome way. And I'm like, ooh, yes, because we can spend so much of our life avoiding the barriers because that's the other side of the barriers is where the scary things are, or the frustrating things are, the things that we don't have and we want, or the things that we don't want to have and we keep them over there. But if we stay safe, right in the middle, nowhere near a boundary, nowhere near a barrier, we're not going to actually like address things. That's powerful. Thank you, Jacob.
No, thank you for picking that up. And like, if I could sort of describe what barriers are in just plain language, a barrier, perhaps it's like that's the way it's always been, and a lot of people accept
Oh,
that. A lot of
yes,
and
yes.
a lot of people accept that that's the way it's always been, and they don't think twice about that until something within themselves, usually around the chest, doesn't sit right, and it's just like that's the boundaries. That's like that doesn't feel right. Like just, and I'll put an example. Like for when I was in primary school, I just knew that we had to put the rubbish in the bin. It's so simple. I was a kid, put the rubbish in the bin, and then I seen a lot of kids my age like just throw it on the ground, and I said, hey, like we got to put it in the bin. It's like, oh no, like the cleaners will pick it up. And I said, okay, yeah. And if we just leave it, if we put it in the bin all the time, then they won't have a job. And I'm like, okay. Um, and that makes me think maybe they think that, you know, maybe they think, maybe some people think that the way it's always been is good. But what happens when we try something different? Like what would that cleaner turn out to be? Like what kind of job would then be created for that person? Right. And that's just like one example of that's the way it's always been. Let's not go out of our comfort zone. Let's just stay in the comfort zone because that's all I know. And I love hearing it within organizations and companies, and particularly around accessibility. Um, like, oh, that's just the way it's always been. We don't need like an elevator because we never hired someone with uses a wheelchair. Maybe if you build it, they will come. I don't know.
Yeah.
But usually that is the case. And for me, the way it's always been, I think that TV and representation and books and media play a really large role in showing the way that things have always been, and that can really influence what someone's outlook on life is because that's all they have seen. They haven't seen someone that uses a power wheelchair that's singing opera. Why? It's not because it's like not happening. It's because it's not on TV and represented. So it takes people that are willing to understand what their barriers are or what their boundaries are in life and challenge them and being curious. And I think that we can get some pretty awesome results. But we got to do it one step at a time, one step at a time. And sometimes we know that it's 10 steps away and we rush into it and we tell people that's where it's going to be. But we got to realize that other people aren't there and they're just at the beginning of that journey. So we got to bring it all the way back to where they know things are at. Like, okay, architects, we don't have an elevator. Why not, like, if we were to get an elevator, where would we even look at? And that might be like one step instead of just going for a grant to get an elevator from council. So then it starts their journey into getting the idea of it in their minds and then inspiring them. Perhaps, like more people can come in, and that's really good for tradespeople. They can get, their trolleys up and down. And it's just like that's one thing. And I have a rule. I try to stick to it. It's like anything more than 2 steps is too many. So just like one at a time is really good. And I try to apply that in most things that I do when it's around others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much profound wisdom in there, Jacob. And one of the things that, to underline what you've said there are people, and that sounds very general, but the status quo benefits some and not others. And when a status quo in whatever field, whatever capacity, is questioned, challenged, there's invitations to change, that can be upsetting, threatening, because that's change, and sometimes people, structures have benefited financially from that structure. And any concept of change threatens that security. And, we see this in all sorts of aspects, and we see it politically, we see it socially, we see it economically, we see it, well, yeah, like in so many fields. And that what you're saying there is in responding and choosing to respond curiously and taking people along with you. Almost to the point, I got the sense, almost to the point if, using accessibility as an issue, sorry, not as an issue, as an example. It's like almost like planting the seed in their minds. So when that seed grows into a plant of an idea, actually, I've had this really good idea. Like, let's make this space accessible. And it's the idea that you planted has turned into their idea. And it's by being a step ahead and inviting them forward. I feel there's so much in that. There's so much in that for when we do change in whatever capacity, but particularly in ourselves too. It's like, take a step into the future and invite the rest of you.
Oh, absolutely. It sort of reminds me of when I was learning about habits um, and coming out of a hospital with a power wheelchair and just so severely depressed because of the fight or flight response coming away from endone and lyrica and all those things. But that's not who I am, and that's not who I was back then. It was just the body's response. So I was trying to understand what the habits were that I had. And by the way, I had all of these new habits forced upon me because of the function and ability from what my body could do. And also being in the hospital system. So now it's like, okay, what is the habit? What are the habits that my body is doing on autopilot? What even are they? And how do I make better habits for myself? One thing that I noticed, as much as I didn't want to go into the pain, was exercising at the gym or just exercising. It was so painful, but I always felt better after, as in mentally. I always mentally felt better after. Um, and so I think that understanding habits are really good. And I think that with understanding what those are and becoming more mindful, then we can also challenge them within ourselves. Like, are they serving me well? And I think that comes with self-awareness and a self-assessment. And I think the self-assessment should come first, because without assessing ourselves critically, then it's sort of unrealistic. And having someone that we trust in a safe way to maybe go through that self-assessment, and asking them, what do they think that what we're saying about ourselves, is it true? Is it factual? Do you think that about me? And that's like I find that a really helpful tool to begin a journey into a place that you want to be, that is serving you well. And I think that also could be something a organization can do as well, self-assess, and then get the people from outside of their business to say, do you think that this is true? Like, we think this about us. We think that we're the best. Do you think this is true? And then just in a safe place, we can go through that list, and then that's how we can understand where to move towards. So then that organization could be served well by their habits or their processes.
I think I'll add to that. I completely agree. I'll add to that. Sometimes that self-assessment is something that is not wanted. It's not something that we want to do. And we can want to avoid it. But sometimes, owing to circumstances, an accident, whatever, like insert circumstance here that's out of our control and that we don't want, we can be compelled uncomfortably to sit with that self-assessment. We always, while we might not get the choice in that self-assessment, and bringing it back to your story here, Jacob, that your accident and the self-assessment that came afterwards was not wanted, but you chose to respond to it. And this is the part that I want to add. Self-assessment is really important, individually, personally, organizationally, societally. I'm just making up a word, as a society. But we choose to do it kindly. We can choose to do it kindly and honestly. Because we can do things kindly and not be honest, and we can do things honestly and not be kind. The superpower, the sweet spot in the response is pretty much always kindness and honesty. And so, listener, viewer, if you're at that point of self-assessment and your internal narrative is saying words to the effect of "you're a piece of shit" for thinking and feeling the thoughts and feelings of loneliness, that you're a fundamentally broken human who is unworthy of love and belonging, you can remind yourself, as I'm reminding you now, that you are worthy of love and belonging right now, even in the midst of a loneliness experience, even in the midst of something that you really don't want to be experiencing. And you can choose right now to do things kindly and honestly within yourself. And that can give you the space, the grace, all of the good things while you are moving forward, while you are doing the self-assessment, while you are doing the things that you possibly don't want to be doing. It turns you in yourself into an ally as you are navigating this, this part of your experience. So self-assessment, critical. How we do that, you get to add that bit. And pretty much from my experience, it always goes better within me when I choose to be kind and honest with myself. Jacob, I want to ask you sorry, go on.
I love that. Thank you for saying about the kindness. I think that's really good and helpful for a lot of people, including myself. I think that's easy to come away from that kindness within ourselves. I definitely love to be kind to others.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing that up.
And I'll say this just before I throw to a break for a moment. But I'm so generous with giving people, I can respond kindly and honestly, a lot easier than I can within myself. Absolutely. So it's still a work on, with something that I need to work on within myself. Jacob, I've got a couple more questions for you. We're just going to take a quick break.
Sounds good.
Have you ever been with someone, perhaps it's been with your partner, or maybe while you're at work or out with a group of friends, and despite having people around you, you just feel disconnected? And this is an incredibly common experience, one that I've certainly had many times. And when these things happen, we often don't really know what to do about it. Or worse, we think there might be something wrong with us for having that experience in the first place. Hi, This is Pete from the Humans Connecting team, and if you've experienced what I'm talking about, then you might find our Connection Starter course really helpful. See, these feelings, they're all just expressions of loneliness. And before I did the course, I didn't even realise I was lonely. And I certainly didn't see these feelings as an invitation to discover how I could become more connected to myself, more connected to my people, and more connected to the things that I'm most passionate about in my life. Now, the course itself, it's made up of a series of self-led videos, a comprehensive workbook, and a handful of external resources, all lovingly led and supported by Phil and the team here at Humans Connecting. By the end of it, you'll have your very own personalised connection plan that is specifically tailored to you and your unique connection needs. Look, it's made a huge impact on my life, so if you're curious about improving the connections in yours, jump over to humansconnecting.org and under the products menu, click on the Connection Starter course, because you are absolutely worthy of it.
Jacob, welcome back. I just got a question for you. How do you do connection now? What does connection look like for you after your accident?
Well, I think connection, it's for me, it's really about the values that I have with others. And if we share similar values, or if there's a way to understand that we do share similar values, and it's through empathy and it's observing how someone it for me, it's observing how someone shows their empathy. That's how I understand if there's a genuine and strong connection, because I want to be connecting, I feel like, with people that I truly share the same or similar values with. But I also challenge that too. And I'd like to understand people outside of my values, and that's also me being curious. And that might be just from making eye contact in person, just making eye contact and being present, and asking people about their life, and what drew them towards where they are now. And I think I can understand a better picture of a person and not their occupation in that question, because I think people can have so many different occupations, and I feel like a very unhelpful thing that we do is say that, oh, I'm a builder or I'm a carpenter, when truly there's a person behind that and there's a story. And I think that I've been there in the past and come from breaking my neck and being in construction, and then needing to understand within myself what I'm adding to society. That's why I asked that question about what drew you towards where you are now. Yeah.
I love where you took that. I love where you took that, because I've asked the question in my mind. I'm like, physically, like, like how does connection look for you, like in as you're in a wheelchair? But you just like you answered that far better because the lesson in there is that, picking up on your point, someone says that they're a builder, someone says that they're a carpenter, someone says that they're a lawyer, someone says that they're a mum, someone says that they're a dad, or, insert role here. Someone says that they're in a wheelchair. Someone says that, yeah, like, insert label. Someone's gay, someone's bi, someone's trans, someone, whatever. Insert any of these labels, right? Fundamentally, we all have a need for connection. And thank you. I don't know if you did it on purpose, but I'm grateful that you did, on purpose or not, for reminding me through your answer that my question wanted to put the label on. and talk about the label, not the basic human need that we're all worthy of, no matter what the labels are, because the labels can get in the way. Oh, that was awesome. You have just you've I don't know if it was accidental or deliberate. Either way, it was bloody awesome.
Appreciate that, man. And I think that I've seen a lot of my friends who I met in the spinal cord injury ward, some people that I will never meet again because they had an injury and they were on a holiday in Australia from Denmark, and I've met so many people, and I stop asking now when I play wheelchair rugby, like, how did you get your injury? I don't even care.
Yeah,
First, like, I don't even see the disability. I just see the athlete, or I see the father or the mother, more anyway. But
yeah,
I know that there's more of a story behind everyone, and it reminds me of when I met this person in hospital, and she was laying on a hospital bed with people around her who were a family, and I just went straight up to her because I knew that we're family now, because we're going to be here for a long while, and I don't know how long it's going to be. And I went straight up to her and I held her hand, and I just said, "Don't know who you are. You don't know who I am, but there's a reason why we're here, and we're here for each other." So, like, there was a lot of things that she went through, with just having a child, and just getting an apartment, and getting married. So these are all labels as well. But who is she? And I think that's what she needed to find,
mm,
and we all need to find as well within ourselves. And one thing that she constantly said to me over the years of knowing each other, we're good friends, was like, "Oh, Jacob, I don't know how you do it. Like, you're so confident." I said, um, "Look, it's not about anything besides what you're doing. It's not about your ability, like the physical ability. It's not about all of those things. It's about just being authentically yourself."
yeah,
And you can be powering on a power wheelchair. I said, like, your head could be in a jar and you're just talking from the jar. It doesn't even matter if you're a complete physical, like Iron Man or anything like that. I said, like, your eye contact, or just the words that you choose, can set the tone for everyone. And it's like, you don't need a physical body to do that. It's about communication. It's about knowing ourselves, knowing our boundaries. And she is thriving. I'm so happy to say that. After visiting her, she's thriving. She's being a fantastic mother. She's back into the workforce. She just happens to be using a manual wheelchair. Okay, like, it doesn't mean anything.
yeah,
And yeah, that's just like one story. But then another story is my cousin, doesn't have a disability, and he says, "Oh," like, he tells me about his problems, and he's in high school, and he's like, how he wants to join the band, and things like that, but all these other kids, saying, "Oh, it's like, it's not like manly or anything like that." And, like, at the end of the day, like, are they serving you well? And also, like, some of my favorite, like, artists and things like that, they're in bands from a young age. And I said, like, in herd mentality, people say nasty things because it's easy. And by themselves, like, individually, they're going to say something completely different to your
yeah,
face, one on one. And that's unfortunate. And then he says, "Oh, it's easy for you to say because you're so confident." And I'm just sitting there. That was when I was using a power wheelchair. And he was like, and I'm just thinking, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm in a power wheelchair and you call me confident? So
yeah,
what does that mean? It's about one's mindset. And he's thriving now, and it's about being honest and being vulnerable. So he was vulnerable and he was honest to me. So then I can give him some reassurance that he's not
yeah.
alone.
Yeah. One thing here, I'll thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And God, it's a gift. You are just like casually dispensing, your ability to see people as they are in that moment and in a way demand to be seen as you are in that moment. It's an absolute gift. One of the things here that I feel is really important in how you do this. Like you were saying, allow people to be a space where people can be vulnerable, and you be a space where you can be vulnerable with others. Connection happens however we are, however we identify, whatever, is going on for us in life or on that day. Connection only happens on the other side of being vulnerable. We need to wrestle with it each and every time. And sometimes with other people, like the people around us, can make it easier to be vulnerable, but it's rarely easy to be vulnerable. And if it's easy, I would argue we're not being vulnerable. But the gift that you are giving to the woman in hospital at the start, soon after, I'm imagining, soon after a life-changing incident, an event, and a whole lot of questions, a whole lot of like, I do not know what is happening. Like their ability to be in that space and, touch her hand. It's like, we don't know each other yet, but we're going to be firm friends. Like we, it's almost the absence of the bullshit compels all of us to acknowledge what's there. And secondly, I want to get into this. I just want to flag this. You've mentioned wheelchair rugby a few times, and I'm keen to just to get inside your head, because wheelchair rugby is insane. From what I've seen on TV, it's violent, and I'm like in awe, and just your poor hands being like crushed in the melee. But I want to sort of put a pin in that. But I feel here, Jacob, and the thing that I really want you, viewer, and you, listener, to pick up on this: being present and being that place where vulnerability is encouraged. Like Jacob, your cousin, who may have been wrestling, as we all do in our ways, of being uncool as a teenager, but really wanting to follow his interests in music. Like, yep, that insight that you had of like someone saying, yeah, people en masse, they might be saying things, but one-on-one, they'll be saying something completely different. And we've all got experience of that when we were in our teenage years. And yeah, like it's just this gift that you have, that it feels like has always been part of you, but almost, I don't know, I don't know you that well, but it feels like, since your accident, like the nonsense, the bullshit has been stripped away, and you've only got time now for the real stuff. Is that landing?
Yeah, it's definitely landing for my experience. Yeah, I think when I broke my neck, the moment that I did, I was at a food market. I was on the grass. I didn't land a front flip well, and the moment that I broke my neck, came to me within my mind, completely sober as well. This is going to be really fucking hard, and if anyone's going to get through it, it's going to be me. and I'm going to have an 85% recovery. Yeah, so that was what came to my mind. And I was practicing mindfulness beforehand, which I think helped a lot. I was physically fit, didn't really know much about mental health, right? Which is unfortunate. But I was also practicing mindfulness just to be more mindful of how I was feeling um, after a bad breakup where I was cheated on, which is unfortunate, and that's just my past. Um, but the mindfulness helped, and I think that what you were describing is like just getting rid of all the nonsense and getting to the point. I think mindfulness also helps in that, and it's just breathing exercises. But I noticed myself stop looking at my reflection for validation, and in the gym, and this was before my injury. And just closing my eyes at the gym, there's a big mirror there. A lot of people know that there's a mirror there, but why not close my eyes and see within and exercise? And I just practice that more and more, and it's like delaying the gratification, right? And maybe that's got to do with the ADHD that I have. If I can delay the gratification, I can have more focus. I'm not too sure. And bring it back a little bit around vulnerability. I like what you said there about being vulnerable allows for that connection. I'm wondering what happens when we get to the next step where it's not vulnerability, it's just being shameless about being yourself.
Shameless or unapologetic?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm all for unapologetic. I'm all for shameless too. But I'm here to be unapologetically me. And I'm most definitely a space where I like, you're not in my life unless you're unapologetically you, or on the journey to being unapologetically you. Um, so yeah, like that's the gift. And I feel that's the space that we all want, and it's certainly what I wanted. Certainly what I wanted. Wanted in the workplace because I was surrounded by extremely smart people doing amazing things. And me feeling completely inadequate, completely, missing the point that, I'm also smart and was doing amazing things, but, I was always in compare and contrast mode, and I was always finding new and novel ways to lose that game. And yeah, but I wanted spaces where I could be me. Problem is, I didn't know who I was to be like when I was in that space. So I couldn't recognize the space, and I didn't know who I was. And so there were lots of chickens and eggs that needed to be worked through within myself. But the being in spaces where we can be unapologetically ourselves, and also being the space where if someone isn't really ready to be themselves around us, it's okay. We're here for when you're ready. And I certainly get that sense from you, Jacob. Um, and I want to, just keeping in mind the time for you, what's the one thing that you get connection wise? What's the best thing connection wise that you get from wheelchair rugby?
Oh, there's a lot. So I think connection wise is it's around the representation and to show, for example, that not all people are defined to their sport or to their function, and also another reason why I got into the wheelchair rugby is because of accurate representation, um, the media for people with disabilities. And we got the Paralympics coming on the 28th of August in Paris. And let's watch some wheelchair sports, and let's just see if there's anyone walking out of their chairs, because it might not be for wheelchair rugby, but for perhaps wheelchair basketball, there's a lot of people that can, not all, but can walk in and sit on their chair and play wheelchair sports for wheelchair basketball. And for me, the wheelchair rugby is just, I can ambulate and I use sticks. And I think that's also part of that desire to make education accessible. Not all people are defined by their mobility aids. They're just more of a visual assistant, visual tool. For example, like a walking stick. Be careful. Wheelchair. Be very cautious. I don't know if you've ever seen someone ride a bicycle on the side of the road and cars are just scraping past, but if there's a wheelchair, they'll give you 5 meters. And it's just so interesting that that visual aid, the visual tool, can do such a powerful thing in society. So I think within that wheelchair rugby, if I can get to the Paralympics as well, I want to be able to help with that visual representation too, to show that not all people are the same, and it's why are we just seeing the same things? And why is that important for connection? I think more people can connect because of real examples and real representation too. That's authentic. And when I say these things in the sport, people connect with me. Not all people, but people like me can feel safe and share that they do those things. Yeah, and it's just really interesting what stories can come from that.
I love it. Visibility matters. I can't wait to see you on TV in LA in 28 and Brisbane in 2032. Yeah, as when this goes to air, the Paralympics will be on. So that's what, and it certainly must see TV in our house as well. Final question, and this is a question that I ask every guest, and I don't know if you know what's coming, but like it's not prepared, so you haven't been asked this in advance to prepare to give you an indication of where the conversation might go. The question is, Jacob, what's one piece of advice that you can give to someone who is in the middle of a loneliness experience right now?
I think one thing is to know that it's been said a lot of times, but it's that you're not alone. This feeling of being so isolated, and there's a dark space everywhere, and all the aspirations are gone out the window of who you want to be in the future. That you're not alone in that feeling. And one of the most hardest things to do that will serve you best is to tell somebody, and tell somebody ideally that you know and trust. But saying I need help, humans often just help. I need help. And making that clear, that's the hardest thing to do. But after you've done that, it's just on an upwards trajectory after that. I've been there. It's not easy. Yeah, so just telling someone that anyone that I need help, but if it's a doctor, maybe do that. If it's your neighbor knocking on their door, just saying I need help. Like, we just humans, we know how to help, but like we can't do it without getting clear directions.
Brilliant. And one of the things that I love about it is you went somewhere you went somewhere inside. So your head was back, your eyes were closed, and that came from somewhere inside. It's one of the reasons I loved asking that question, and that if something's if you're prepared, then it can be scripted. Generally not. But that your answer has come from somewhere inside.
Oh yeah, it's come from pain.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, but it came from pain, and it came from coming out of that too. And I reached out to my grandma and I said, I need help. And it was like very hard for me to say that to one person. And she was the person that raised me after being taken away from my mum. And all she said was, honey, it's okay. We need like, and then she just, whatever happened after that, like, it's just like, you just follow that. Like, it doesn't even matter what she said after that. It was just like, that was the hardest thing to do. And then I did it. And then I ended up going to the doctor and getting onto the pain meds to wean off it. That was my little way of getting back onto medications after going cold turkey, which is not
Yeah.
good.
No. Jacob, how can people find you if they've got questions for you? Is there a best way to find you? And we can put the link in the episode description.
Yeah, just reached directly out to me on LinkedIn, Jacob Darkin, and I say that because I want more people with disabilities to get onto LinkedIn. And if it's not accessible, then you can connect with me on Instagram, Jacob.Darkin, because I think that if people with disabilities are going to be represented, then LinkedIn is a really good platform for that within at least business. So that's why.
Lovely. Jacob, what an absolute privilege and a joy it has been to spend some time with you today. Thank you for sharing some of your story. It is always, whatever the story, it is always a privilege to spend some time in that story. Thank you for being brave and courageous and allowing me to ask questions and prompt and poke a bit and stuff. But I just really just admire the generosity of your spirit.
Thank you, Phil. I really appreciate you, and continue with your journey too here on this podcast, and looking forward to following it, learning more.
Here for it. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you, mate. Take care.
Weren't they just some fantastic insights that Jacob just freely dispensed to us in that conversation, where he so generously shared some of his story with us? I'm really curious to speak to you now, just really quickly. I've got a couple of questions for you. What spoke to you from that conversation? What's come up for you now? How were you served, supported, challenged, and inspired to do connection in your life? Were you inspired to maybe not set up office in your nearest lift or your nearest elevator and hold court in Jacob Darkin style, but were you encouraged and inspired to run a connection experiment to work on your social health and well-being? Because that's what stuck out for me, is that simple power that comes from testing a hypothesis in the way that Jacob explained, and running the experiment. And generally from experience, and Jacob's too, and my own, I fear that the outcome will always be terrible, when really, in reality, it is almost always amazing. And I rarely, if ever, regret running a connection experiment. So for me, that's what I got out of it, is, that kind of the simplicity of testing a hypothesis and choosing connection. I'd love to hear what came up for you and how you were inspired by Jacob's, like the conversation that you just joined us with, Jacob. So in wrapping up, I just want to say this. You've done something wonderful in joining us for this episode. You've done something that is absolutely going to feed connection, and you have invested time in making that happen. And all of those things, the investment of time, the challenging of yourself, and being inspired to do connection, are fantastic first steps at getting the connection that you need and deserve. And just a really quick reminder, this kind of awareness, this inspiration, this is the thing that helps us each develop the momentum that we need to start taking steps in choosing connection. You have a powerful choice in how you choose to use this information and use this inspiration. I really do know, I just know that you're going to choose someone. Now, as always, we'd love to hear from you about how our content is helping you become a connected human. And you can get in contact with us in all of the usual ways. And we here at Humans Connecting, we are a social enterprise who is absolutely committed to making a positive impact on humans globally, particularly around how humans prioritize and then go and get the connection that we each need and deserve. So if you're a business, if you're an enterprise, and you're also wanting to make a positive social impact, please get in contact with us and through the link in the episode description, set up a call and let's have a chat about how together we can have a really positive impact that serves humans. That's it for this episode. We simply cannot wait to serve you, support you, challenge, and inspire you in the next episode. We'll see you then.